Goeiedag en hartlik welkom by Regheid met Robinson hier op Litnet. Ons gas is Songezo Zibi. Hy het onlangs 'n boek geskryf, Manifesto, waarin hy sterk en reguit standpunt inneem oor die huidige situasie van verval in die land en dan gee hy 'n visie oor hoe die situasie beredder kan word. Hy kom uit die diep platteland van die ou Transkei. Hy het gewerk vir Volkswagen, Xstrata, was redakteur van Business Day en kommunikasiehoof van Absa. Hy het daarna 'n burgerlike organisasie, die Rivonia Circle, gestig. Dit is eintlik 'n dinkskram om oplossings te probeer vind vir die erge ekonomiese en politieke vraagstukke in Suid-Afrika. Hy stel homself ook blaatant voor as 'n presidentskandidaat vir aanstaande jaar se verkiesing. Mr. Zibi, welcome. Why should the people of South Africa vote for you as a president of this country in the future?
Look, I think I've done what most South Africans wish they can do, because we're all frustrated with what is going on in the country. And in essence, it's not supporting me as such, but it is just giving an opportunity for South Africans to realize their best aspirations by getting personally involved in determining the future of the country. And that is why I'm doing this together with my colleagues at Rise Mzansi.
In your book, you're actually quite forthright in your attacks on the present government and the situation in the country. Just give us a broad kind of quick view of what is worrying you most.
Well, when I wrote the book, load shedding was an issue, but not such a big one. But obviously now load shedding is now a big issue. But more than that, it's the realization that the ANC, even when it means well, no longer has the people that can solve the problems of this country. That puts us at great peril as a country, because it means things continue to get worse and worse. Now, when you consider that a lot of people in the ANC have no intention of governing effectively at all, it just puts us at greater risk. I think apart from the material issues, the infrastructure and so on is at the core, we have political leaders who are no longer able to govern at all, and the country is falling apart as a result.
So, what is the essence of your manifesto?
The essence of the manifesto is that we actually have a unique opportunity to unite behind common values. I think we've reached a point where we agree vehemently on what is wrong in the country and the kind of things that we need to fix. The question is, are we able to get together on the basis of shared values in order to fix those problems and build the society that we want? My proposition is that absolutely, this is a wonderful opportunity. As difficult as things are, it's a wonderful opportunity to turn the country around and to unite behind the values of freedom, equality, justice, solidarity, and integrity, which I think resonate with many South Africans.
What you're telling me now is basically the broader approach that you have and the view of what should happen in South Africa. But in a very practical sense, what must change? Legislation, the constitution, what must change and why?
So firstly, I think at a political level, we really have to change our electoral system. We absolutely must change the electoral system, because while in 1992, 93, 94, up to 1996, we wanted to solve a problem of minorities and other parties that felt that our system would not be sufficiently representative. This has given us a system that is unaccountable. It makes political parties too powerful and it weakens the voters. We have to change that in terms of legislation. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the country needs an opportunity to change political orientation. You know, the ANC has got a very deep distrust of business. And as a result, we have, I think now, between 600 and 700 billion rand that is sitting in company savings and other instruments, which can be invested into the economy. But it can't, because we do not have just the orientation, let alone the legislative instruments to unlock that funding so that it can work for the economy. Specific example is the energy sector. we could have liberalized the energy sector a long time ago and unlocked private investment to solve this load shedding problem. But we are still fighting about whether we should have private investment in the energy sector at all. And the damage to the South African people is really severe. So that's the second thing. And the last thing, Fred, is, and it's really important, in our work at Rivonia Circle last year, we have found consistently in 8 of the 9 provinces that ordinary people want the opportunity to be grown-ups in their communities and solve the problems of their communities. People don't want handouts. They want a job. They want an opportunity to say, this is how my community should work, and this is the role that I'm going to play. So we can also change the style and substance of our politics from, I'm going to make miracles for you, to you can be the change that you want to be, and that message resonates with people.
So you want direct representation. People must be able to vote actually for a specific candidate in a certain constituency, and not in general for a party where you never get the opportunity directly to influence the vote of who's going to be president or who's going to be on the party list or anything of that kind.
We can have something similar to what we have in the local government election, where we've got a hybrid. So even the proportional representation councillors that all the political parties put up, we still know their names. And even when they're contesting a ward directly, we still know their names, right? It forces a level of disclosure where you're able to go to a particular person and say, I don't like the job you're doing on my behalf. I want somebody else. That's how democracy is supposed to work. But that's not how it works. As a result, the bad apples rise to the top, and they're always in parliament. And the people that should be doing the work are sitting on the outside. And even worse, Freek, you then have members of the government executive choosing who is going to oversee them in parliament. Now, that doesn't work. You can't ask the wolf to look after the chicken coop.
So why should people then, starting with the first question, specifically ask you to become president? What qualifications do you have? What kind of experience? What kind of skills do you have to actually be our president?
So, Frank, firstly, we don't have presidential elections in South Africa, but this is why people should join me on this journey. One is that I think I have been bold enough to say we have to do this and not equivocate, because South Africans never want to step up. A lot of people never want to step up and raise their head above the parapet and say, listen, we can change the country, let's do it. That's the first reason. The second reason is that I actually believe that we can mobilize South Africans from all walks of life, people with enormous expertise, and we've started doing that already, to start on a clean slate and try and build the country of our dreams. And it's possible, and we've been doing this in the health sector, with energy, with education, and so on. From people who work for large companies to people who are activists on the ground, working together to work on the solutions that we want. That's the second thing. And the last point is, I think we need a generational change in South Africa. You know, President Ramaphosa was 39 years old when he was negotiating with Rolf Meyer, who was 37, the future of South Africa. He's still there. He's in his 70s. This is no insult to him, but what new ideas can he come up with now? And are we surprised that we don't have solutions to the problems of the day? So I think that is why I think supporting somebody like me to be part of leading the national change is so important.
The electoral law is in front of Parliament at the moment. So what's going to happen probably, if they listen to the courts, is that you will have the opportunity as an independent to go and stand in whatever area of the country that you want to. So are you going to do that in a practical sense?
No, not at all. So I'm now part of what we call the RISE campaign, or RISE Mzansi, which has the RISE campaign. And what we're doing, Freek, and this is why I keep de-emphasizing my personality, is that we are now mobilizing at least 5,000 people like me who want to change the country to start a political movement that we are going to launch in April. And that political movement will get all the people that otherwise would participate in a flawed system of independent candidates to fight in the 2024 election and beyond. Here's why I don't think the independent route is going to be successful. The ANC and EFF have rigged that legislation so much that participation by independents is theoretical. It cannot, it cannot succeed because they have set higher obstacles for independent candidates than formal political parties. They have set a higher bar for new political parties than existing political parties, and they've identified entire provinces as a constituency for one independent candidate. Now, if somebody is in Cape Town, I'm not sure they can persuade somebody in George or in Knysna to vote for them because they just don't know them. So Rise Mzansi is an effort to build a collective of leaders who work in communities, work on the national stage to contest the election in 2024.
Now, we in South Africa have a long history of all sorts of ills, apartheid and colonial times and so forth. So therefore, we are damaged people to a certain extent, and we can see it in the streets today. That people are unhappy and they actually vent their anger at various levels and so on. So what are you going to do about the mindset of people so that can change, and with that, we can move into a new era?
So, people are not protesting because they're angry at the past, by the way, it's because they're angry at the present, right? So that is the first thing. The second thing is that people want to reconnect with their old community and political values. When I grew up, my school that I went to, as under-provided for as it was built by my community. Come 1994, the ANC and the rest of the political system says, we will do everything for you, which means you take people's agency away. Now, people are protesting because they feel disempowered. They go to the councillor and they look for answers and there are no answers. What we have found over the past year, where we haven't just had conversations with people, but we've motivated them to start and complete actual community projects, is that people want to work for themselves. They understand that democracy means you work hard every day to create and sustain solutions for you and for your community. People are ready for that message. What they don't like is being lied to. Somebody saying, I'm going to perform miracles for you, and then they don't.
Well, we all know that in the elections that we've had in the past, people who did not want to vote because they've always done so for the ANC just elected not to vote at all. Now, is it possible to turn that kind of approach, to turn it around?
Look, you've gone to the nub of what Rise Mzansi is trying to do, and that is to come up with a kind of politics that resonates with people who otherwise would vote but cannot find an alternative. And there are several things that annoy people, and I'll just give you one. One of those is the party membership form. The party membership form puts people off because you're forcing them to be part of a club they may not want to be part of in order for you to have a political conversation with them. The new approach that we're taking is that it doesn't matter. Rise Mzansi is not going to have members. It's only going to have organizers. And those organizers' job is to hold open community meetings where we discuss issues in the community and to discuss issues in the country. And as a consequence, whether Freek is a supporter of Rise Mzansi or not, you can walk into a meeting, have your say-so, make sure your voice is heard, and walk out. And that is just fine without being given a membership form. So I think, Freek, we have an opportunity here to create something that is new, that is going to animate people. And the evidence we've seen so far since we started Rise Mzansi is that people are very enthusiastic about this. We're organizing in communities across the country instead of on TV and radio. And that's where we spend a lot of time.
Well, unfortunately, South Africa at the moment is in the grip of a very delicate situation of people who are committed to crime and who are so part of the system already with the kind of crimes that they actually doing, that one wonders, is it possible at all to change the minds of people?
are ready. People are ready for the change. I must tell you, Freek, the people are not ready to move on are the elites. It's the elites who are not ready to move. People are ready to move on. How do we know this? We know this because 28 million of them already don't vote for any of the political parties. It's not because they don't have a political opinion. They're communicating that you don't have anything that appeals to me. Otherwise, I already want something different on the menu, right? Anybody who's not eating, it's not because they're not hungry. It's because they don't like what is on the table. And our job as those who want to drive political change in the country is to make sure that we listen carefully, which is what we've done all year, last year, and we produce a kind of politics that is going to resonate with people. Otherwise, Freek, they really, really are ready. They really are.
But yes, it must be a great concern for you and for others, of course, that it's possible to infiltrate the state and actually capture the state, and whether we are going to succeed in any way of actually getting those people and get them into jail.
I think we can. One of the problems we have is that we've got people who are in association with criminals being ministers and appointing who's going to be the police commissioner and so on. That's the problem that we have. That is why we need a new government. We need people whose interests are not connected to those of the African National Congress and the way its leaders have had these kind of connections with organized criminals and other people. That really is a fact, that whether you are talking about corrupt business people and the way the tender system is rigged, that's organized crime. Unfortunately, if we can't get the politicians out, then we don't have a chance.
Well, we all expect that in this coming election, there will be coalition government, because the general talk is that the ANC will actually get less than 50%, and they'll have to make a deal with other parties, such as the EFF, and then it's going to be a completely different kettle of fish. But what we must do is try to get people to walk with us on that road. What is your view?
So, this is a very dangerous time, Freek, and I'm going to be blunt about this. If we have the kind of coalition we see in the city of Johannesburg, the ANC, the EFF, and the Patriotic Alliance, the country is going to be in very serious trouble. Our job as South Africans is to make sure that we don't have such a coalition next year. Our polling, independent polling, and the polling of the ANC itself reportedly shows that it's unlikely to get higher than 42% next year, which means it's going to need coalition partners. If we cannot bring 3-4 million South Africans who have decided to abstain from voting back into the vote and for them to vote for something other than the ANC, we are going to lose the country. So I'm really worried about the possibility of coalitions. However, that must not make us despondent. We can fight hard and have a kind of combination that is going to save the country.
Well, forgive me for actually getting to a fairly sensitive subject now, and that is that increasingly the whites in South Africa do feel that they are isolated and they are not really accepted in this country anymore. It's not their country. Mr. Ramaphosa himself said so last week at Marshalspoort, that terrible racial incident. They actually had a direct attack on Afrikaners. So in your view, if you become president or anyway in some kind of leadership, what is this practical situation in terms of the status of the whites in South Africa? Must we accept that we're not welcome and we should actually just leave?
No, not at all, Freek. Look, we have to do two things. The first is that we have to have honest conversations with one another. Freek, the past is the past. We can never change it. We can't do anything about it. What matters is what we do about the present and the future, right? And I think too often we are too circumspect in talking about what happened in the past, and we must not do it, because when we do it, we create a distorted memory of what the real history of the country is. So that is the first thing. And for me, when I talk openly about the kind of history that we've had, it's like the way we will talk about the sins of the ANC in 15 years' time or 20 years' time when they're no longer relevant at all. We must not sugarcoat the sins of the ANC either. We must say what happened and say it repeatedly so that future generations don't repeat the mistake again. So that is the first thing. The second thing, though, Freek, is that the biggest mistake white South Africans can ever make is to retreat from political participation. It will be a very big mistake. The Freedom Charter of the ANC itself says this country, South Africa, belongs to all who live in it. This country belongs as much to white people as it belongs to black people. Our responsibility is to honestly set it right amongst ourselves and be grown up enough to have the difficult conversations from a place of love rather than a place of hate. And South Africa will be just fine.
Well, we all agree that racism should be rooted out completely. So do you have any ideas of how this can be approached?
I think, the first thing that needs to happen is this acknowledgement of history, Freek. I think, to be honest, there are white South Africans who feel attacked when you talk about the past. I'm personally not attacking them at all. It just is what it is, right? And we must normalize these conversations. I used to work for a German company, and this particular company played a very unfortunate role in World War II. And you could go to the museum, they would tell you about this, and nobody thought it's a problem. I was shocked when I went there, but we still continue to buy their cars, right? And that's what we must do about our past. If we do that, those South Africans who continue to be defensive about our history will become less and less in number. That's the first thing. The second thing is we must take racism like any other form of discrimination. We currently have a problem of GBV in the country, Freek, where South African men beat up and kill South African women. So we must treat these two things the same. The way we condemn GBV and we take measures against it is the same way we condemn racism and we take measures against it, so that we are consistent in how we deal with all forms of discrimination. Racism is not a special class of discrimination. It's not. Homophobia belongs in the same class. Sexism belongs in the same class, and so on. And that's the way to deal with these things, Freek. Don't create special classes of people. Be consistent in how you deal with all of these things.
You recently said in an interview with Report, I think, is that the situation in South Africa is going to get worse and worse. Do you stand by that, and what do you mean by it?
I do. So you see, Freek, I've been writing for a long time. There was a time when I used to get insulted for the things I get praised now for. Because human beings generally never want to accept their glass half full people. We always want to look on the bright side. And while we're looking on the bright side, things get worse. But fortunately, we're at the point now that a lot of the glasses half full people are beginning to realize it's not even half empty, it's empty. So I expect that things will get a little bit worse than they are right now before they get better. And in a tragic way, it's necessary because we are beginning to have the kind of agreement broadly in society about the problems we have. 4 years ago, if you had said, or 5 years ago, to a South African, especially a black South African, we are going to be like Zimbabwe, they will chase you away, right? You say that now, people say, ish, yeah, they can see it happening. The point is, how do we respond to that moment? How we respond to that moment is by being bold and going for national unity and wanting to bring South Africans together to solve our problems.
Okay, and what do you think must happen first? Now, you obviously is going to work on your ideas and so on, but what do you believe is the most important step that you must take, or that your movement must actually do?
So we've already taken those steps. There are 2 steps, Freek, very quickly. The first one is that we're not a movement that just canvasses for votes in communities. We actually work on community solutions together with communities, because people are desperate right now. They've got problems with crime right now, and so on. So there's no time to wait for for any political formation to get into power and then create miracles. So that is the first thing. The second thing, Freek, is that we working on very bold shifts to the problems that we have. So one of the principles that we have, we're going to set very specific targets in terms of all the big problems of the country. We need to name a number of people that must shift from poverty to middle income status within a generation. And you break that down into 20, 10, 5-year, 3-year, and 12-month targets. Because if you don't do that, you end up with the same slogans 10 years later. So we're going to do that in respect of electricity and climate change, in terms of crime and safety in communities, in terms of social infrastructure, education, and so on, so that we have very specific targets that make political accountability possible. People have got to be able to say, you said you're going to do this within 12 months. How far are you doing? But if you set a big target for 10 years, well, give me a chance. We are still on year 4. That's unhelpful. We've done that before.
You've actually mentioned specifically in your book about the role of civic organizations and so on, and how important that is. So give us just a brief indication of what you actually mean and what is happening in practice.
So what I mean is a practical example, and I think I make it in the book. And you asked me earlier about changes in the law. One of the things we can force through legislation is that all levels of government must publish every 3 months a list of contracts above a certain threshold that have been given, and say which companies receive those contracts. Journalists shouldn't have to file a PIA application to get that information. When you make that information public by default, you make journalists' job easier because they can now look into those contracts. You make civil society's job easier because they can participate in the evaluation of that work and the creation of accountability. You also empower ordinary citizens to ask the question, but why is Songezo always getting all the contracts in all of the provinces? What's going on, right? We need to create those. It's a very practical step. You can change the law of Freek in 6 months. And that law can be implemented immediately. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Then you begin to win the fight against corruption.
You are probably what President Zuma called a clever black. So what is happening there in, say, the middle strata of our society, of black professionals coming into the picture more and more? But what do you find? Are they committed to this country, or are they as well leave in droves at the moment?
You know, you get 2 types of black and white South Africans. You get black and white South Africans who are leaving the country. In fact, I know so many black people in London now that I think they exceed the white people I know who are there by some distance. So there are people who leave. But I also find that there are many black and white, say professional South Africans, I'll use that term, who actually want to stay and they now want to fight for the country. Because they realize the mistake that happened in Zim is that all the educated people left. They came to South Africa, they went to the US, they went to the UK, they went to Ireland, and so on, right? And the country lost the capacity to rescue itself. And now it just cannot be rescued because they're now rooted elsewhere. The really good thing about Rise Mzansi, Freek, out of 10 volunteers we get each day, I can tell you about 4 or 5 of them, about 4 maybe, are white. It's people who don't want to leave. And they're going to fight for the country that they want. And for me, that's really, really energizing and encouraging.
Now, if people are really committed to actually join you and to work with you, how should they approach this?
So we have a website. It's called risemzansi.org, risemzansi.org, or they can write to rise@risemzansi.org. We're working right now. I mean, we're not paying a single person. We've got hundreds of people. They're all volunteering. It is beautiful. There are lawyers, there are community workers, there are unemployed people, and so on. And it's really like a lovely thing to see. I mean, obviously we need the money, but the volunteering is something to see. It's truly wonderful.
Well, is there a general kind of message that you want to give to South Africans? Do you want to tell them, hang in there? Or what is the essence of what you want to get them to realize?
I just have one message. And that message is now is not the time to be scared. It's not the time to be scared. We must treat this moment as 1987. What happened in 1986, 1987 is that South Africans, black and white, realized this is not sustainable. We can't carry on like this anymore. And we ended up with a so-called miracle in 1994. It was not a miracle. There were many, many South Africans. Some were Afrikaners, some were blackened in exile, some were blackened in the country. We're like, can't have this formula anymore. This is such a moment. And the choice they made then was this: as difficult as things are, we are going to find each other and work together and we'll make a plan. And you know what? They did. And for a while, we had the country that we were all dreaming of. So don't be scared, please. Let's get together and let's just get our country back from the thieves.
Songezo, thank you very much for participating in this program. All of the best, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much, Freek. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.